Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Heated Shenanigans Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, thank you for joining us. I am your host today, Scott, and guys, let's get right into it because joining me today is professional wrestling legend and superstar. He has been all over the world for professional wrestling. If there's been a major company, he's been affiliated with them. Please welcome in at this time my guest, Just Incredible.
How you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Again, thank you so much for taking time to do this. It's truly a pleasure to speak with you.
No, thank you for having me. I look forward to having this conversation. It's always good to sit down and talk about the business. So thank you again for having me.
All right, well, we'll get right into it here, sure. Justin. So one thing that I had heard on an interview between Tommy Dreamer and another podcast, and it really stuck out because I was very curious to see the truth behind this. He had felt and thought that Paul Heyman had been working for Vince McMahon the entire duration of ECW and was just using ECW as a testing ground for Vince's ideas. Is there any truth to that, or?
I mean, there was a ton of speculation. Look, if Tommy says it, he would be one of the only people. Him and maybe one or two other people that would know that. There's certainly evidence to it, because hand in hand throughout the entire, real run of ECW, especially during the pay-per-view era, we seem to be almost connected at the hip. So, there is evidence of that. I don't know. I think that Paul Heyman was certainly working with Vince, or else we would not have had some of the exchanges we had. I mean, ECW made an appearance early on Monday Night Raw, especially leading into the first pay-per-view with Jerry the King Lawler, etc. So, there is a lot of evidence of that, and also too, I know Vince had let Paul borrow money, if that in case was the truth, but. The other thing which is weird to me, is I know Tommy Dreamer lost maybe $100,000, if not more, dollars of his own personal money, of his family money, into help funding ECW when times were tough. And and I've heard that from other people as well. Chris Candido had said that he was paying for travel on his credit cards for a good period of time, almost $75,000 in the hole. So I would wonder if Vince McMahon was solely behind and funding ECW, if that would have been the case. So I think somewhere along those lines, it blurs into a little bit of all of it. I would imagine. I would assume.
I mean, crazier things have happened in professional wrestling. That's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, no, and I mean, but if you really think about it. That had never been done in modern wrestling. So, I mean, Vince certainly saw something in Paul, and I think ECW as well was. You could really say that it was NXT before NXT. You know what I mean? Maybe to a different degree. I mean, certainly the ideas were Paul's, but it's just a lot of guys that were coming through. ECW, not all, but the ones that they wanted to kind of groom were sent there. So, I think it was that, but also I think it was Paul's baby in a way, because we also went through some times, especially in the 99s and 2000s to the close, where it was 100% Paul trying to keep that alive. And if Vince wanted to keep it alive, it would have been alive. So, once again, the pay-per-views, and then even to go back and do one-night stands, which we can get into later. So there was just a lot of, I think what ECW was doing culturally, Vince McMahon was smart enough to realize this is its own thing. Let's just see where it goes and let these guys do what they do. And he could always come in and be a part of it if so desired, or take ideas and or talent if he wanted to,
So as somebody that has been affiliated with both WWE and ECW, as you have, what would you say are some cultural differences between being in the ECW locker room versus inside the WWE machine locker room?
It's a good question. It really, I guess ECW locker room wasn't. It has the reputation of being this crazy place, but it really wasn't. The longer and longer we were doing big business, especially during the pay-per-view era, starting with the first one and moving forward, the TNN run, etc. We were a very professional locker room for the most part. I mean, you always had guys that were a bit on the wild side, which is what helped make ECW. But I wouldn't say it's so different, other than there were no politics. The respect for veterans was always there, especially at ECW, more so than in any company. The young kids, guys and gals coming up in the business, were very respectful of the veterans, and it was just a. It was just a nice thing. I think both locker rooms were similar, except ECW was less political. And I won't say was not political, because that's a bunch of BS, because it was a little political when you had factions like, and again, these are all my friends. I never had personal beefs with any of them. But, you had the franchise in Bam Bam Bigelow and Chris Candido on one end. And then you also had, Taz and his one or two students that he was trying to help out, and then you had the Dreamer Bubba Ray faction because they were friends, and everybody also, all those people had a stake in helping the company. Bubba Ray Dudley, got a lot of our buildings for us, helped sell tickets through Ticketmaster and other local venues. Shane Douglas did the same in Pittsburgh. Tommy had a lot to do with the merchandising, literally ran the entire merchandising department. So there was a lot of those, anytime you have those kinds of people in power, or I should say the boys, there's going to be a little bit of politics. But again, the politics were not nearly as strong as, of course, in the WWE.
Fair enough. So over the course of your career, Justin, what would you say is the greatest story you have seen told in a professional wrestling ring? Not necessarily a match, but the psychology of what you're watching take place.
That's a really good question. Huh. I don't really know. I have to think, but let me think about this. I guess I could just... I guess from being... I'm going to try to answer this as best I can. As a fan... Very early on, I analyzed wrestling before I ever saw a dirt sheet or before any of that stuff. I kind of knew, and I think most educated people knew what the business was, and I got obsessed with it at a young age in high school. Freshman year, sophomore year, I was doing backyard wrestling, and I was trying to. I never really got into the mark aspect of it, although I can't say comfortably that I am a mark. But I never bought into necessarily the storylines. Never grabbed me as much as the action in the ring, the actual performance of the matches. So there's not really, any particular storyline that stood out that I could say, wow, that really changed me. I guess one would that comes to mind, and it's definitely in my formative years, was 1989. Right after Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat, I think Flair beat Steamboat to get the NWA World Championship back, and then Terry Funk had come in and attacked Flair and tried to kill him with I don't know if you remember the angle, put the plastic bag over his head. I thought that was fascinating, and then that storyline is kind of the first time I was presented to, to the greatness of Terry Funk and to just his masterful ways. But I guess that would be it. But I never really looked at wrestling as far as storylines. I was always into, for me at least, like the quality of matches and the emotions that some of those matches would bring, not so much from a storyline standpoint, but from a technical, like, wow, that's amazing. I'd like to learn how to do that,
I think that's a good answer. I get it. This is one of those questions that I love getting the answer from my guests, because everybody has such a different enjoyment for professional wrestling, and there's really no wrong way to answer it. One thing I was very curious about, though, over the course of your career, what would you say is one lesson that you didn't expect to learn in professional wrestling, but you did, and how did it change your career afterwards?
Ooh, that's another good one. the old stone cold DTA. Don't trust anybody. I was a very young, impressionable young man. I mean, I got into the business at 19 was literally my 19th birthday. The night of my 19th birthday, I had my first match in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, October 16th, 1992. And from then on, I just, you're in this world where, you're still half a fan and you're meeting people for the first time and globally too. I mean, I'm born and raised in, I don't know where you guys are from, where you do the podcast. Where are you from?
Lafayette, Indiana.
Okay, you're in Indiana. I'm a Connecticut East Coast guy, born and raised. I'm 45 minutes away from the office in Stamford, Connecticut, the WWE headquarters. Just happenstance, just happened to be there. Never moved here. I was born and raised here. But I had traveled to Calgary to train, and anyways, long story short is you start to see through your travels and traveling really all over the world, that friends are, and you at that age you're longing for mentorship, for guidance, for friends, and there's really no names of anybody that stick out that did anything really bad to me, but I started to learn very early that you couldn't trust anyone with just your simple emotions of how you felt about something. If you went and said something to someone in confidence, that at times, at least in that era, was quickly turned around, and you'd walk into the locker room and people would be like, "What did you say? What was that?" So I just learned very early that you couldn't trust anybody, which is very, very difficult and different when you're a young man and think the world of a lot of these people, that you admire. That being said, though, I did find some friendship in a weird way with guys like Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels, by happenstance, by even Kevin Nash, X-Pac, just because I remember just being a young kid on the WWE house show run. I wasn't Aldo Montoya yet. I was PJ Walker, and I was too young to rent a car. And I was driving to the show. They fly you into the airport, and I got to the airport, and I had nobody to travel with. They get your plane ticket, but they do not provide ground transportation. So I went with some of the agents, which today are called producers. Don't mind my, I'm old school, and that's just how I recall the terminology. But these producers, the old school cats, Chief Jay Strongbow, Tony Gurria, Blackjack Lanza, Hall of Fame guys, they would drive me to the building, and Razor came up to me, Scott Hall, rest in peace. He's like, "Who you traveling with, kid?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't rent a car. I'm too young." Because back then I think you had to be like 23 or 24. I didn't even have a credit card. So he goes, "Bro, you're going to get so much heat traveling with the office. The boys are going to think you're a stooge." He goes, "From now on, you come with me." And something as simple as that is how, and he was one of those people that, for good or for worse, because I learned a lot of bad things from him as well. But that kind of started with those cats.
Let's say one thing a lot of people may not realize is you are actually a member of the Kliq.
I mean, look, I hate to say that because, I don't hate to say that, but I certainly didn't reap the rewards of any of that. I wasn't involved in any of it politically, but I was their friend. I mean, shit. If you can go back and you can Google this stuff, in '99, Shawn Michaels had left the business and he started his wrestling school where he trained Daniel Bryan, Lance Archer. I went down to Shawn's house, stayed at his house, and helped, when I was in ECW as the World Tag Team Champion, I believe, helped him out down there in his school. Razor, as you know, I've been friends with him forever. Kevin Nash, Paul Levesque, when he first came in, and when Joni, a.k.a. China, first came in, we were all traveling together. So I was involved with them from a friendship, or a.k.a. acquaintances, more friends than acquaintances in those days. But the shit they were doing was kind of above my pay grade. Like, I was getting enough heat traveling with those guys, but I also didn't want to get so much heat where my push never got affected, or lack of push, I should say, never really, it had nothing to do with them. So I was, I got to hang out with them. The benefit was I learned a lot from them and how to do business or how not to do business. But, so I could say I was Kliq by default, not necessarily in there,
Fair enough. I do want to go back and cover your run in ECW as the World Heavyweight Champion for ECW. What did that mean for you when they came up to you and said, "Hey, we're making the decision to put the strap on you"? What was going through your mind during that conversation?
Well, I didn't have a lot of time to think because that happened. I got the news. It was at the ECW arena, and I got the news literally, maybe 15, 20 minutes before it happened. And this was about mid-show. If you remember, this is when we had a situation where Mike Awesome had the title, and Taz had come from the WWE to do the, so we could get the title off of Mike. It was a big to do, So literally, we had a WCW guy with the ECW title, and a WWE guy coming in to face him, which was unheard of. Think about that today, if that existed, like having an AEW guy fight a WWE guy that has the belt, So anyways, long story short, after Taz had gotten the belt, he was going to wrestle Tommy Dreamer. And the whole thing was for Tommy to get the belt, and then, of course, Tommy being the woe is me, always loses babyface, I had to be there to kind of squash that, but I did not find out until about 15, 20 minutes prior. I don't know if it was to keep the sheets away or, because back then we didn't have the internet. So we did, but it was like ECWWrestling.com was more just like pictures. Videos weren't really, it wasn't like what we have today, not even close, It was a lot of news and pictures. But even then, I guess Paul didn't want anybody to know, or there were a lot of stooges in the back, and with OneWrestling.com at the time. So anyways, long story short, I didn't find out until very, very, very late in the evening. Almost like, I didn't have time to think or feel. But it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. So,
Fair enough. So we had touched on it earlier. You had mentioned ECW One Night Stand. WWE has taken a couple of attempts to recreate the magic ECW had, but they just could never get it.
No.
What is it you think was going wrong with WWE's vision of an ECW brand?
The reason ECW One Night Stand worked was because it was legitimately ECW. It was the venue was ECW. The staff that ran it was ECW. Everything down to the last. I mean, it was wholeheartedly an ECW show. The thing with ECW is we had a rebellious spirit. We had a very independent spirit, and we were fueled by what WWE or WCW was not. We'd do anything we could to differentiate ourselves, to be the bad boys, to just be, to just be that thing that we were just what was cool at the time, from the music to the girls, to the violence, to everything. And when WWE gets its hand on that, although One Night Stand went out and became a classic, one of the best shows of all time, then Vince, kind of sees, well, I can't have Terry Funk and Cactus Jack burning the place alive with barbed wire and blood, and New Jack doing this, and the Impact players doing that, or whatever it may be. It's just something that could never be. ECW was special because Paul Heyman allowed us to do us. Although it was very much Paul's vision, it was that spirit of anti-establishment. So how could you have that vision and that feeling of anti-establishment, that punk rock feeling, when you're owned and operated by the man? You just can't, right? You just can't. As great as it was, and I loved, and I wished, and we all had wished, because ECW had so much more to give, in my opinion. We were all so young and so vibrant when it went out of business, and it broke all of our hearts. You cannot replicate that when you are a billion-dollar company, and we were the little engine that could. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I've had Shane on here, Francine, and we've all talked.
Oh, there you go. You've talked to the franchise. Forget it. I don't even need to speak anymore. Brother?
No,
I'm sure he talked your ear off.
Oh, Shane's
the best. Dude, Shane's the best. I love Shane. He's one of the best.
He had a lot of really good insight about ECW, and
he's awesome, dude. I could hear the franchise tell the same story forever. He's so passionate, and he's so smart too. You know, man, I miss him so much. Miss all those guys. That's the thing, is there was so much. Just like how that brought joy to know that you had a conversation with Shane, knowing kind of like, because he talks a lot, and sometimes it could be exhausting. But just knowing that, knows that, like, you know how passionate he was and how great he was, you know, and how much he's still so sharp. You know what I mean? Those are the guys we had. We were running the shit. So, you know, Paul led us around, but we individually also did our path. You know what I mean? Did our parts. So very cool.
What would you say over the course of your career is the scariest bump that you have taken?
Ooh.
And additionally, what is the scariest bump you have seen someone else take?
That's a good. You got really good questions. Scariest bump I've ever taken. I guess I could say this one. Myself and Jerry Lynn, 1997, what was the pay-per-view? Heatwave. We were both on the top turnbuckle, and we had a table to the floor, not into the ring. And Jerry and I were on the top, and he gave me a hurricanrana through the table on the outside. It ended up being very safe. Nobody got hurt. But just being up there and looking down, it's very intimidating. If anybody, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but just getting on the top rope, standing all the way up and looking into the ring, that's pretty scary. If you've never done it and you have access to a wrestling ring, do it, because you're up there. Now imagine that going to the floor where there's no, even though the rings are pretty snug, still a decent, it's not the concrete and the table. So that was a little concerning, but I did good. I didn't get hurt, thank God. And someone else take, to me, it's still I know there's worse bumps, categorically speaking, and I don't even want to go through them. But to me, what sticks out is the classic Mick Foley Hell in a Cell. Because I know what you're going to say, the ECW, they did so much crazy shit. That's true, but this to me was just so iconic. I remember I think my wife and I had just gotten married, and we were watching the pay-per-view at her mom's house in New Jersey, and I kind of fell asleep, and all I remember is waking up to, oh my God, they killed him! Mick Foley's broken in half, and you see it, and it's like, never seen anything like that before. So to me, that captured my heart, and I love Mick. Mick's one of my favorites. So
that's one of those that it stood the test of time.
Still does. I know there's crazier, right? People are crazy, which I hate. I think we have a real problem with some of that stuff because there is too far sometimes. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I do a weekly AEW review show for Vince Russo and his brand. Been doing it now since the inception of AEW, which I'm very proud of. And Vince and I had talked about it, and it's like, we hope we're wrong, but somebody's going to get seriously hurt one day trying to do something that, we got to be careful. You can only, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes you got to realize and pump the brakes. And I think we're at that stage, and I hope it doesn't happen. But anyways, I digress. That's the bump. So in closing here, just incredible.
Do you have anything you want to promote? Anything you got coming up that the fans need to know? How can they reach out to you on social media?
I don't have anything to promote necessarily now, but, just please follow me on Twitter. I'm an interesting follow. I love to talk pro wrestling and movies and all kinds of stuff. At PJ Polacco, and of course on Instagram at PJ Polacco. And I have a great YouTube channel. If you go on over to YouTube, hit the search engine and type in Pro Wrestling 101. I got literally a library of 10 to 15 minute clips of complete pro wrestling how-to kind of things. Very educational. I just kind of drop knowledge that I got from the great Pat Patterson, Tony Gurria, a lot of the superstars from the WWE that helped mold me. And I reiterate that in my Pro Wrestling 101 series. And, a good one is ProWrestlingTees.com/JustIncredible. I have over 20 amazing designs, retro, some Aldo Montoya stuff. So go on over to ProWrestlingTees.com/JustIncredible. Cool stuff there as well.
All right, guys. Well, again, Justin, I want to thank you for your time. And
my pleasure,
guys.
Very, very cool.
Oh, thank you. And guys, for Scott of He Did Shenanigans podcast, we will see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.